Hi, my name is Mars.
Hi, my name is Chuyen. We are both senior here at Knox College, which was founded by abolitionists.
Speaking of abolition, we are going to be talking about the Underground Railroad today.
So let's start with some background. The enslaved Africans were a big part of the history of the United States. They contributed to the establishment of colony in the America. They fought in the Revolution, and while the colony achieved independence from the British, Africans still had to wear the slave collar, but this time put on them by the American. Yes, as slavery expanded during the second half of the 18th century, a growing abolitionist movement emerged in the North, and one of them was the Underground Railroad.
So, what was the earliest record?
The earliest record we have was in 1831 when an enslaved man, Ty David, tried to escape his master by swimming the Ohio River. He would not capture, and his master insists that he had gone up using an underground railroad, which is said to be the origin of the name Underground Railroad.
So the earliest representation of the Underground Railroad as an actual train appeared in 1844 in the Western Citizen, which was an Illinois abolitionist newspaper. As iron railroads spread across the North, so did the lingo of railroading, like stations, station masters, cars, and passengers. These words were then used in coded language to talk about the Underground Railroad.
However, the records were mostly exaggerated. The Underground Railroad wasn't a literal railroad, but a network of people providing shelter for enslaved people. They didn't have elaborate map or clear route, but rather local groups who would communicate with each other. People know as conductors guide the fugitive enslaved people to different stations. These stations are hiding places including private homes, churches, or schoolhouses. And while the earliest documentation was in 1831, the preparation for the Underground Railroad happened much earlier. Quaker abolitionist Isaac T. Hopper set up this network of tunnels, and is thought to be the father of the Underground Railroad. Many well-used routes stretched to Ohio to Indiana and Iowa, while others head north to Pennsylvania and to New England or to Detroit. Some make their way to Canada.
They headed to Canada. Why was that?
The reason behind this is because of the first Fugitive Slave Act in 1793. The Slave Act allowed the capture and return of runaway enslaved people within the territory of the United States. Thus, the streets at that time were full of officers and bounty hunters. Ironically, the USA had always been considered the land of freedom since its foundation, but now thousands of people have to leave it to find their freedom. In order to give a good picture of this, let's give this one the timeline.
Now, in 1833, the American Anti-Slavery Society was founded, and this organization is notable in our discussion as many of its members later became activists in the Underground Railroad. There was also an abolitionist group called the New York Committee of Vigilance, which was founded in 1835 and was created to defend black New Yorkers from predatory whites, especially police officers and bounty hunters. Looking at around 1840, many enslaved peoples escaped across the Ohio River, and Ohio turned into one of the most active centers of underground activity. A little while later, in 1847, William Still was hired as a clerk by the Pennsylvania Society for the Abolition of Slavery. He soon became the coordinator of one of the most important underground networks in the country, linking activists from Norfolk, Virginia, to New York and throughout southern Pennsylvania.
The activists did not go unpunished for their bravery. In 1848, Thomas Garrett, one of the most important station masters, was put on trial in Wilmington, Delaware for helping the escape of 6 fugitive slaves. After his acquittal, he defiantly declared that he would add another story to his home to accommodate more fugitives. Around 1849, Harriet Tubman escaped from slavery in Maryland. She later returned at least 13 times to rescue slaves and guide them to safety in the North, becoming the most famous conductor of the Underground Railroad. Thomas Garrett and William Still be among her closest collaborators.
Getting to 1853, in many parts of the North, the Underground Railroad became increasingly open as Northerners refused to cooperate with federal officials. In Detroit, Michigan, Albany, New York, and elsewhere, underground activists openly advertised their work with fugitives. During the Civil War, the Underground Railroad was superseded. In 1870, after the declaration of the 13th Amendment, Levi Coffin declared the Underground Railroad had reached its symbolic end. Okay, so we touched on some important figures in our timeline. Now let's go a bit more in depth. We talked about Isaac T. Hopper being known as the father of the Underground Railroad. Let's hear a little bit more about him.
Isaac Hopper was a tailor and a Quaker abolitionist. He established what was called the first operating cell of the abolitionist underground. While being a tailor by trade, he also excelled at exploiting legal loopholes to win enslaved people freedom in court. Another figure is John Brown. Much like his father before him, John Brown actively took part in the Underground Railroad, harboring runaway at his home and warehouse and establishing an anti-slave catcher militia following the 1850 passage of the Fugitive Slave Act. Brown's final raid took place in October 1859 when he and 21 followers seized the Federal Armory in Harper Ferry, Virginia, in an attempt to foment a large-scale slave revolution. Caught and quickly convicted, Brown was hanged to death that December. Another important figure mentioned earlier was Harriet Tubman, former slave and later an Underground Railroad activist. During the Civil War, she served as scout, spy, and nurse for the Union Army and even reportedly became the first U.S. woman to lead troops into battle.
And we mentioned Levi Coffin earlier as well. He was known as the president of the Underground Railroad. Levi Coffin purportedly became an abolitionist at age 7 when he witnessed a column of chained enslaved people being driven to auction. He claimed to have assisted about 3,300 enslaved people, saying he and his wife, Catherine, rarely passed a week without hearing a nighttime knock on their side door. Operating openly, Coffin even hosted anti-slavery lectures and abolitionist sewing society meetings, and, like his fellow Quaker, Thomas Garrett, remained defiant when dragged into court, saying, "The dictates of humanity came in opposition to the law of the land, and we ignored the law." Speaking of Thomas Garrett, he was one of the many station masters, claimed to have aided 2,750 fugitives prior to the outbreak of the Civil War. Occupational hazards included threats from pro-slavery activists and a hefty fine imposed on him in 1848 for violating fugitive slave laws, yet he determinedly carried on. So why is this important to learn about?
Historically, the Underground Railroad played a crucial role in the abolitionist movement. The story of those who escaped enslavement served as a powerful testimony to the inhumanity of slavery, inspiring others to join the fight against this oppressive institution.
And every kid growing up in America has learned about the Underground Railroad because it is such an important part of our history. There are still tensions in the U.S. because our country was built on slave labor, and it is important for us to recognize this, especially here at Knox College, since it was founded by abolitionists. And of course, we have to cite our sources, most of which were found on the Knox College online library, history.com, U.S. National Park Service, and Fergus Bordovich. Go check them out if you'd like to learn more about the Underground Railroad.